Donald Trump is killing, thousands of Americans by giving them duff advice, and his macho, I'm all right, look at me, I've survived COVID, is an absolute buffoon. He has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment, and he should be ashamed of himself, especially when thousands of Americans have died. COVID is a serious disease. It's a serious pandemic. People have died, loved ones have died, and he's an absolute disgrace. And so is Boris Johnson for not being able to even know his own rules.
Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the UK Labour Party, found herself at the centre of a political storm after making a series of harsh comments about former US President Donald Trump. During an interview, Rayner called Trump macho and used strong language to criticize his leadership, calling his behavior and advice dangerous, particularly in regard to the thousands of American lives lost due to his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Rayner's words struck a nerve with Trump, who has spent his political career building an image as a bold, unapologetic figure. For Trump, insults like these are never left unanswered, and as expected, he retaliated swiftly and aggressively. His response was not just an exchange of words, but a direct challenge to the UK Labour Party, and it set off a chain reaction that would reverberate far beyond the political stage. In a typical Trump fashion, the former president didn't shy away from the confrontation. He labelled Rayner's comments as foolish and made it clear that such remarks would have consequences. He publicly mocked Rayner, questioning her competence and advising her to look in the mirror, suggesting she needed to re-evaluate her actions. For Trump, who thrives on direct confrontation and political battles, this wasn't just a minor exchange. It was an invitation to retaliate. Rayner's harsh words were more than just an expression of disdain for a political adversary. They were a spark that ignited a much larger fire of tensions between the UK Labour Party and the US. This verbal clash between Rayner and Trump didn't end with insults. Soon after the exchange, the political fallout began to manifest in the form of tangible economic consequences. Trump, using his power as a former president with strong influence over US trade policies, initiated a series of trade tariffs aimed at the UK. These tariffs specifically targeted industries such as steel and aluminium, both vital sectors of the UK economy. The imposition of these tariffs had an immediate and significant impact, raising the costs of goods, particularly for manufacturing industries in the UK. This economic blow served as a direct response to Rayner's comments, demonstrating how personal grievances between political leaders could quickly escalate into real-world consequences for businesses and workers. The confrontation between Rayner and Trump was more than just a political disagreement. It highlighted the delicate balance that leaders must maintain in international relations. Rayner's unrestrained comments not only challenged Trump personally, but also reignited a strained relationship between the Labour Party and the United States. This exchange was just the beginning of a series of diplomatic and economic challenges that would leave the UK with much more to navigate than just political tension. The consequences of Rayner's remarks would soon ripple out, affecting the UK's global standing and economic stability. The fallout from Angela Rayner's comments about Donald Trump quickly escalated beyond a war of words, manifesting in tangible economic consequences for the UK. Trump, never one to back down from a confrontation, responded by implementing a series of retaliatory tariffs on key UK industries, notably steel and aluminium, sectors critical to the country's manufacturing and export economy. These tariffs were a direct response to Rayner's harsh criticisms, and they created an immediate strain on British businesses. For industries already struggling under the pressure of rising costs and supply chain issues, the new tariffs exacerbated the financial hardship. The result was a significant increase in the cost of goods, particularly in manufacturing, where steel and aluminium are integral to production processes. For manufacturers, this meant rising production costs, which inevitably trickled down to consumers, making everyday goods more expensive. The timing of the tariffs was particularly damaging, as the UK was already grappling with the financial aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges of navigating a post-Brexit landscape. Many UK businesses, especially in manufacturing, found themselves caught in the crossfire between political tensions and economic realities. For workers in these industries, the imposition of tariffs meant job insecurity and stagnant wages, further compounding the financial pressures they were already facing. It wasn't just the industries directly affected by the tariffs that suffered. The ripple effect was felt throughout the economy. With higher production costs, businesses were forced to raise their prices, resulting in increased inflation and a higher cost of living for ordinary Britons. In addition to the immediate economic pressures, the tariffs served as a stark reminder of the delicate nature of international trade relations. For the UK, The imposition of tariffs highlighted just how quickly personal and political disputes could turn into diplomatic and economic crises. The Labour Party, under Keir Starmer's leadership, now found itself in a difficult position, forced to navigate the fallout from Rayner's comments while attempting to salvage the UK's strained relationship with the US. Starmer had to contend not only with the political fallout within the UK, but also with the broader implications for the UK's economic and diplomatic standing on the world stage. The trade tariffs underscored the interconnectedness of global economies, where political rhetoric could have real-world consequences. As the UK struggled to cope with the economic impact of the tariffs, questions began to emerge about how Labour would handle future trade negotiations, particularly with the US. The incident exposed the fragility of international relationships and the potential dangers of unchecked political rhetoric. For the UK, it was a reminder that diplomacy, even in times of conflict, required careful management, especially when it involved a powerful player like the United States. The economic fallout from Rayner's words was a clear sign that political missteps could quickly escalate into a much larger crisis, one with far-reaching consequences for businesses, workers, and the economy as a whole. The political tension between the UK Labour Party and Donald Trump took a significant turn as the ramifications of Angela Rayner's comments continued to unfold. As the economic damage caused by the retaliatory tariffs took hold, the Labour Party found itself under intense pressure to respond. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, was now caught between two very difficult choices: either try to repair the fractured relationship with Trump and the United States, or risk further political and economic fallout. The political calculus was clear. Keeping a strong relationship with the US was crucial for the UK, both in terms of trade and international diplomacy. However, Starmer also had to manage his party's image, which was increasingly tarnished by the inconsistency and mixed messages coming from its leadership. Starmer's initial response was to downplay the severity of the situation, maintaining that the Labour Party's commitment to diplomatic relations with the US remained intact despite the recent tensions. But the damage was already done, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for the Labour Party to navigate the diplomatic minefield. The tariffs, which were already having a real economic impact, added a new layer of complexity to the UK's international standing. Many British citizens, particularly those in industries directly affected by the tariffs, were now questioning the Labour Party's ability to effectively manage the UK's relationship with powerful global leaders. The impact of the tariffs was being felt in key sectors like manufacturing, where companies faced increased costs that ultimately led to higher prices for consumers. As the cost of goods rose, the working-class voters who had once supported Labour found themselves increasingly disillusioned with the party's inability to protect their interests. Moreover, Starmer's attempts to maintain political expediency while managing the fallout from Rayner's remarks appeared inconsistent. His public stance on Trump had been somewhat contradictory, trying to balance between diplomatic civility and the criticism of Trump's policies. Starmer's failure to take a firm position, either to condemn Trump or stand by his earlier more conciliatory approach, left many questioning his leadership and political direction. For the public, it became apparent that Starmer's strategy lacked clarity, leaving the Labour Party vulnerable to accusations of indecisiveness. Worse, this indecision was beginning to harm Labour's credibility, both domestically and on the international stage. The political gamesmanship within Labour, which included playing both sides of the Trump issue, was clearly backfiring. As the situation continued to unfold, it became increasingly clear that the Labour Party's handling of the Trump issue was not just a political embarrassment, but a severe blow to the party's reputation. The United Kingdom was now facing the consequences of political mismanagement, where personal grievances and diplomatic inconsistency were beginning to overshadow the party's ability to advocate for the interests of the British people. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. Starmer now had to find a way to stabilize the situation and regain the public's trust, all while navigating a complex web of international relations that had been made far more difficult by his party's recent missteps. As the tension surrounding the Labour Party's handling of Donald Trump's criticisms deepened, the growing inconsistencies in the party's approach became harder to ignore. Keir Starmer's leadership was now facing serious scrutiny, not just from political opponents but also from within his own party. The central issue was the party's mixed messaging on the Trump administration, which had created confusion both domestically and internationally. Starmer had initially positioned himself as a leader who could engage with the United States while maintaining the principles of the Labour Party, but his actions increasingly appeared contradictory. On one hand, Starmer sought to maintain diplomatic relations with the US by speaking positively about the need for strong ties with the country, particularly in defense and intelligence matters. On the other hand, he allowed critical comments about Trump, especially from figures like Rayner, to persist, which only served to undermine the Labour Party's credibility on the global stage. This inconsistency in approach left Starmer in a difficult position. His public support for diplomatic relations with Trump contrasted sharply with the critical rhetoric coming from other members of the Labour Party. The situation was made worse by Rayner's inflammatory comments, which had sparked a major diplomatic row and led to retaliatory. The Labour Party's stance seemed incoherent, as it tried to juggle maintaining a friendly relationship with a powerful global leader while also catering to its base, which was critical of Trump's policies. This dual approach became a glaring example of political expediency, with the party appearing to avoid taking a firm, principled stance. The message was muddled, and many began to question whether Labour had the strength or clarity to represent Britain effectively on the world stage. At home, the fallout was also damaging. Labour's credibility with voters, particularly working-class communities who had long supported the party, began to erode. The tariffs imposed by Trump were not just an abstract diplomatic issue, they had real, tangible effects on British families. As key industries such as steel and aluminium faced economic pressure, workers saw their livelihoods jeopardized. The Labour Party, instead of advocating for these workers, appeared to be caught in internal political games that did little to address their immediate concerns. The lack of a clear, consistent response to the economic impact of the tariffs further alienated Labour from its base, leading to frustration and growing disillusionment among voters who were already struggling with rising costs. In this context, the Labour Party's internal divisions over how to handle the Trump issue became a symbol of its larger problems. The contradictions within Labour's approach to international diplomacy were mirrored in its domestic policies. The party's failure to present a unified, coherent message on the global stage not only weakened its position in the US-UK relationship, but also reflected poorly on its ability to lead Britain in times of economic and political uncertainty. Starmer's leadership, which had once promised a new direction for Labour, now appeared indecisive and politically weak, with the party's credibility hanging in the balance. The internal confusion and public frustration painted a grim picture for Labour's future as it struggled to find its footing in an increasingly complex political landscape. The economic and diplomatic fallout from Rayner's comments about Donald Trump quickly highlighted the deepening crisis for the UK Labour Party. As the retaliatory tariffs imposed by Trump took hold, the effects were felt almost immediately across key sectors of the British economy. The steel and aluminium industries, which were essential to the UK's manufacturing and export markets, were hit particularly hard. The introduction of these tariffs created a ripple effect, raising production costs and causing a significant increase in the price of goods. This not only hurt businesses, but also had a direct impact on consumers, driving up the cost of everyday products and further straining families already grappling with rising inflation. The UK's manufacturing sector, already fragile in the post-Brexit landscape, found itself struggling to remain competitive, and many workers in these industries faced the harsh reality of job insecurity and stagnating wages. For the Labour Party, the imposition of tariffs was a stark reminder of the dangers of diplomatic missteps. While the party's leadership had tried to downplay the seriousness of Rayner's remarks, the economic consequences could not be ignored. As costs rose across industries and inflation continued to climb, the Labour Party found itself unable to offer any concrete solutions to the economic turmoil caused by the trade restrictions. This left Labour in a precarious position, caught between internal divisions over its approach to Trump and the mounting pressure from voters who were struggling to make ends meet. The mixed messages and lack of clear, decisive action from Labour only exacerbated the situation, as the public began to lose faith in the party's ability to manage the economy effectively. The tariffs were not just an economic issue, they were a political one as well. The UK was now facing a diplomatic quagmire where the need to rebuild relations with the US was at odds with the Labour Party's internal battles. Starmer, as the party leader, was under immense pressure to manage the fallout. The damage to the UK's reputation on the global stage was becoming more apparent, as it was increasingly clear that the country's political handling of the Trump issue was weakening its standing in international relations. As Labour struggled to find a way forward, the US response to Rayner's comments served as a reminder of the complexities of global diplomacy. where personal disputes could quickly escalate into real-world consequences. The tariffs ultimately created a challenging environment for the UK, with businesses and workers bearing the brunt of the economic damage. Labour's response, or lack thereof, to this crisis only deepened the sense of frustration among the British public, who were already feeling the squeeze from rising living costs. Starmer's leadership was increasingly questioned, not only for its handling of the economic fallout, but also for the lack of clarity in its stance on international relations. As the political and economic landscape became more complicated, it was evident that the Labour Party's failure to effectively manage the Trump issue would have lasting consequences for its ability to regain public trust and lead the UK through turbulent times. The fallout from Angela Rayner's comments about Donald Trump not only created immediate diplomatic tensions but also left the Labour Party facing a significant crisis in terms of its credibility. As the tariffs on key UK industries took effect, the economic consequences became glaringly apparent. The increase in production costs for sectors such as steel and aluminium made life harder for businesses and workers, especially those in manufacturing. For the Labour Party, this was a wake-up call about the broader ramifications of political missteps. Keir Starmer found himself caught between the need to repair the damaged relationship with the US and the pressure to address the economic impact of the tariffs on the British people. The party's inability to offer a clear and decisive response to the economic fallout only deepened the sense of frustration among voters. As the UK grappled with rising costs and job insecurity, it was clear that Labour's leadership had failed to manage the political situation effectively. The mixed messaging from the party, combined with its inability to protect the interests of British workers, left the public questioning Labour's ability to govern. The uncertainty surrounding the UK's political direction under Starmer's leadership only made the challenges even more daunting. See you again.